Good afternoon, everyone. Lovely to see so many people here today. I'd like to call to order the fourth meeting of the Civic Works Committee. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternative formats and communication supports for meetings upon request. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact cwc@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. I just want to start with the land acknowledgement. The City of London is situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Lenape, and Attawandaron. We honor and respect the history, language, and culture of the diverse Indigenous peoples who call this territory home. The City of London is currently home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. As representatives of the people of the City of London, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. I'd like to thank members of the committee for being here today. I'll note that Councillor McAllister has confirmed that he will not be attending today. And we'll look for item 1, disclosure of pecuniary interests. Okay, seeing none. We'll move to item 2 on the consent agendas items. There are a number of items that I'm going to move around with, so if I'll look for a mover to put the following items forward for consent, having, as of right now, only 2 items indicated to pull. I'll look for 2.1, 2.2, 2.5, 2.6, 2.7, 2.8, and 2.9 to be put for consent. Still means we can ask questions. Okay, I'm seeing agreement with Councillor Cuddy as the mover and Councillor Trosso as the seconder. And we'll call the vote.
I'll vote yes.
Thank you. It's still coming. Just a moment, everyone. You're eager to vote today.
Yeah, I can't get it up on my page, so.
No problem. Verbal vote for you is fine. Thanks. Okay, thank you. For those that can see it, it's open in your system. Councillor Trosso?
Well, I'll vote. Oh, there it is.
Closing the vote, the motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. I'll look to the committee for questions or comments on every item that put forward except for 2.3 and 2.4, what we just agreed on consent. Are there any questions or comments about those items? Okay, Councillor Trosso.
Just a very minor question on 2.8. If somebody wants to suggest adding another intersection where there's no right turn, what process would they use to initiate that?
Thank you. I will go to Mr. McCrae.
Certainly, the Service London portal would be a good avenue to access staff, and staff in the traffic engineering division would review those requests.
Follow-up, Councillor? Okay, any other items related or questions related to the consent items? Did staff have any additional comments related to any of those items? No? Okay. Okay, seeing none, what I'm going to suggest is that we move to item 3.1, which is our scheduled item, and then we return to items 2.3 and 2.4, where we have delegation requests, and we have another added speaker, so that we deal with the first item, which was up and not to be heard before 12:05. Is the committee okay with doing that, moving to item 3.1 and then coming back to the other two? Okay, seeing that that's the case, we are receiving a delegation from Professor Preston. I'm hoping he's okay with me calling him Professor Preston. From London Transit Commission, Specialized Transit for Disabled Londoners is the topic. And I'll look to Mr. Preston, Professor Preston, to provide his commentary, and thank you for sending along the presentation as well in advance. You have 5 minutes, and you can hang on after your presentation for any questions from the committee as well. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Before I begin, to the chair, I'm wondering that there are two members of the public that are in the gallery at the moment, Jacqueline Madden and Wendy Lau. I'm wondering if we could get a vote to bring them down to be there in person while I am here virtually.
So they're in the gallery right now, so you're asking them maybe to be at the microphones for additional delegation?
Yeah, if they could be there on the floor, that'll be much appreciated.
Can't be on the floor, no.
So typically what we'd have is for delegation, members would be at the microphones in the public gallery. So that would be fine. But if we were looking to add speakers, I'd have to ask the committee to entertain additional delegations, of which they didn't receive prior notice on. So if you want to give your presentation via Zoom, they are here. We can see them as well and engage that way. That's okay with you?
Sure, yeah, and then one other sort of procedural question. So I have my slide deck in front of me. Are you able to see that there, or do you need me to operate it via Zoom?
So unfortunately, we don't have a way to show that PowerPoint presentation that you provided. However, I will remind the committee that we have received this in our email, and any other members of council that are here as guests as well. So they can pull it up separately and follow along. And maybe I'll just give everyone a minute just or so to do that as well. Okay, and then we'll get started.
Lovely. Yeah, let me know when you're ready for you to begin.
Councillor Chausa?
I know that the slideshow came in after the deadline for the added, so it wasn't distributed on the added agenda. But I'm reminded that there are counselors who are here who haven't seen it. Could we quickly just forward that to other counselors? In particular, Councilor Pribble is here, and he's not on the committee, so he wouldn't have received it.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll share that with the visiting counselors right now, and as soon as they have it, then we will get started, okay? Okay, so, Mr. President, just as we're getting that all loaded and ready for the members that are visiting as well, are you looking to add additional time by having Ms. Madden and Ms. Lau speak as well?
I think the request was really just for them to be available, particularly if there are questions that perhaps they are better suited to answer than I.
Okay, thank you. That helps to clarify that. Thank you. So that's been sent to visiting counselors, and with that, I will ask Mr. Preston to get started. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you to the chair, and thank you to the committee for taking the time to listen. This is obviously a really important issue, something that feels sort of very critical, very timely, but unfortunately is a problem that is not new. What we're going to be talking about today are things that people in London have been experiencing for a very long time, not just because of COVID, not just because of recent changes, but rather a dysfunctional system that has let too many people down, that's resulted in many people with disabilities having to find other ways to try to get around this city, which is something that I think you have the opportunity, the ability to do something about. So this presentation, this conversation was presented by myself, but also with support from people like Jackie Madden, Wendy Lau, but also from a bunch of people in London that want to see us do better by paratransit. Several weeks ago, we put the call out asking for people to share stories about their experiences on paratransit. And we received over 40 little vignettes, stories that are startling, surprising, perhaps unsurprising for some. But ultimately, what we heard were the things you probably have also heard talking in the community. We've heard things about people dialing hundreds, thousands of times to try to book a ride, only to find out that they are not able to get one because all the rides are booked. We heard people share heartbreaking stories about how they had to change their life, change the order of things that they were doing because of the restrictive 3-day booking requirement. We heard about people calling for hours and not getting a ride because there just weren't any left. We heard about late pickup times or missed rides, people being left at the curb. We heard about excessive time on the bus spent driving around and around in the city in a way that didn't really make any sort of sense. We heard about safety concerns, about lack of respect, and about a disciplinary nature of a system that seems to demand riders to fit within the system, as opposed to a system that's trying to enable the riders. Now, as you'll see in the package, ultimately London has two different obligations, legally speaking, when it comes to accessible transit. Obviously, there is a human rights requirement. The Human Rights Commission has been quite clear that accessible transit is a protected provision. It's a human right that we should have access with dignity to accessible transit. Not only that, but we also have obligations under the AODA, both in terms of training under the customer service standard for people that are delivering frontline service, but also the integrated standard that talks very specifically about how our transit should be offered in parallel, that experiences on conventional systems should be mirrored by services that are run for people with disabilities, whether that's in the way that fare is charged or the amount of fare, about the ways that booking can happen, specifically around same day or next day booking. There are quite a few obligations that if you bend and look at it through a little prism, you can perhaps see ways that the LTC is currently complying with the obligation. But I think if you look at the experiences on the ground, we are far from fulfilling the obligations set out by things like the Human Rights Tribunal, but also more specifically here by the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, an act which says that we should be fully accessible by 2025, and we have 2 years left to get there. I think then if we look high level at paratransit in comparison to other services around the province, you'll see that we are also falling behind. Comparable cities have online booking options, and at worst, next day booking, whether that's OC Transpo in Ottawa or Oakville Caravan or Milton Access Plus. Comparable cities have live tracking, something that we don't have yet, like DARTS in Hamilton or York Transit. And there are other cities, comparable cities in Ontario, like the region of Peel, that are using family of service model, which are relying not just on one set of buses, but are looking out into things like accessible cabs and other services that may be operating in the city to have a harmonized approach to use all of our services in tandem, something that we're really not doing. So ultimately, we're looking for a reduction in the time it takes to book rides, a reduction in the time it takes for you to call through, or even better, have a means to get online, a reduction in the frequency of late and missed rides, and a reduction of excessive ride times. So in the presentation, what we've laid out essentially is 3 steps. Step number 1, we would like to see same-day booking by 2023, smart card access on buses, sensitivity training. By January, we want to see an online app booking option with live bus tracking and increased efficiency, so we're not spending so much time on the bus. And last but certainly not least, we would like to see a 10% increase in ride capacity year over year over the next 4 years, so that fewer people are being left calling and being told that there are no rides left. Ultimately, I think all of you decided to be on council because you wanted to make London a better place. You wanted to enable Londoners. This is an opportunity for you to do just that, to make a choice. It's easy to say that it's not your thing or it's someone else's responsibility. You have the power to do something. You have the power to do better. Please, please help all of us, disabled Londoners and Londoners who may soon be disabled, to have access to our city in a fair and equitable manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Preston, for your presentation. I'd like to note that on Zoom, we also have Ms. Pleshny available to answer any questions of the committee and to hear from the speakers today. As indicated by Mr. Preston, he did offer the opportunity as well for Ms. Madden to answer any questions that are provided today by the committee. And also just wanted to note that the presentation, or sorry, the report by Ms. Madden as well was shared with committee, just looking at comparable systems in other places. With that, I'll go to the committee for any questions or comments. Councillor Cuddy, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Dr. Preston, thank you very much for that passionate presentation. I'm going to tell you that I'm shocked at what I've been told by constituents and by stakeholders in my ward in London at the poor service that we offer in paratransit. And I really don't have a question because I've heard from many constituents during the election and now. And I've talked amongst the councillors about this problem. And while I don't have a question, I just want to make a comment that that I know the council wants to do our very best to provide service, better improved service to paratransit immediately. And we'll work, I know that this council will do everything in our power to make that happen. And again, thank you for coming, and thank you for the presentation, and thank you all for coming and making this presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Chausa?
Thank you all for coming. This was a very compelling presentation. I was particularly moved by the attachment that had the very several testimonials from disappointed riders. And indeed, this did not come as news to me because I have spoken with a number of the people who were listed here. And I'm glad we're getting this on the council table early in the council term. And I'm really particularly glad that we're getting this while we still have our strategic plan and our multi-year budget still before us. I have some very serious organizational questions about the capacity of LTC, and I will turn to the director in a moment. But I just wanted to make sure that the submissions that you made, including the attachments, will be reflected in today's minutes that go to, that go to council? Yes, that's what I thought. Okay, with that, you have gone through, Mr. Preston, Dr. Preston, you've gone through a number of specific requests. Are you asking this committee today to adopt those requests and forward them to council, even though at the same time you're also going to be making a similar presentation to LTC?
Thank you for that question. I think that would be a fabulous thing for this group to do. I think that ultimately there are two parties here. Of course, there's City Hall and there is the Transit Commission. But this is a big problem, and big problems need lots of people to try to solve them. I think that everybody has a role to play here, rather than abdicating responsibility or rather than saying this is someone else's problem to be resolved. I would like everybody to agree to commit right here today that says this is the end of it. 2008, I sat in that chamber on my way to Ottawa, about to drive my wheelchair 650 kilometers to raise awareness about this very issue. And here we sit in 2023, many years later, having the exact same conversation. Just like people that are asked to sit on the phone every morning, waiting, calling, dialing over and over and over again, I think that it's time for council to start putting that same amount of time every day into trying to fix paratransit. If it takes us 2 to 3 hours to book a ride, I'd like to see the Transit Commission and City Hall spend the same amount of time every day trying to make this better so that people can get on with their lives, all of us.
Thank you. Councillor Trosso?
Yes, a few more. Does the clerk have the language that was included, or should Dr. Preston send that to you separately? Okay.
Yeah,
So
we have the presentation.
Before I make a motion, then I would like to make a motion. But before I make the motion, I would like to see if it would be okay for me to ask the LTC chair director some questions through the chair.
Yep, through the chair.
Is she with us?
She is on Zoom. And I want to acknowledge that after Councillor Trosa, we also do have as visiting Deputy Mayor Lewis, who has his hand up for a question after.
Oh, okay. Do you want me to defer to Deputy Mayor?
Nope, you can go and then I'll take questions from Deputy Mayor.
Kelly, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. It may be a bit unusual for a council committee to involve itself in LTC matters, but I think there's, the way I understand it, there is enough shared jurisdiction, whereas this is something that's appropriate. So I'd like to just ask you at the top. You've heard the presentation. You've looked at Dr. Preston's proposals. Is that something you think you can do? And if not, what assistance do you need from this council?
Thank you. I'll go to Ms. Poleshny for comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I unfortunately have not seen the actual PowerPoint presentation, so I don't have everything in front of me. I did make notes as part of the presentation, but I can tell you that the primary issues that Mr. Preston discussed are all included on the Commission's work program for 2023, which the Commission did approve at the January meeting. So they are all works in progress. In terms of finite deadlines, I certainly can't commit to that at this point. A number of things require investigation in terms of how quickly we can turn things around, but they are all included on the work program for 2023.
Thank you. Councillor Trosso for follow-up.
Perhaps I should yield to Deputy Mayor Lewis for his questions, and meanwhile, perhaps somebody could send her the presentation too, so she has that exact text in front of her.
Thank you. Okay, I will go to Deputy Mayor Lewis next. I just also wanted to acknowledge that we do have members of our LTC from council here as well, listening, so thank you for being here. I appreciate the attendance as well as the input that you provide, and I know that this matter is also coming to LTC. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Lewis. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I just want to make sure everybody can hear me.
We can hear you.
Excellent. And I will thank, I'm also going to call him Professor Preston because I'm afraid if I call him doctor, he'll pull out his sonic screwdriver. So I appreciate Professor Preston's presentation. I want to thank both him and Ms. Madden as well for taking the time to meet with me one-on-one to discuss these issues too. I knew we had some issues in paratransit. I frankly did not know how bad they were until I took the time to meet with Professor Preston and Ms. Madden and hear those stories. And I appreciate them collecting stories from other system users to share with us. It's really important. And I frankly cannot believe that in 2023, at the bare minimum, by the end of this year, we cannot have an online booking system and app available for people to book their rides. And I think it's absolutely unacceptable that we are holding people who need paratransit service to a 3-day booking window. If somebody knows that they are attending their daughter's wedding in September, they should be able to book that right now. That's not going to change, and they should be able to reserve that. I understand we have to have a certain number of rides available to respond to last minute needs. And so perhaps, you know, there's a system of limiting the number of advanced bookings people can make at any one time. But we have the technology to do this. In 2014, the now mayor and I, as his campaign manager, we had an app developed in 2014 that told people where they could go to vote. If a single ward level municipal election campaign can do that 10 years ago, there is no reason we cannot have an online booking system in place before the end of 2023. So I know that Councillor Trussow has indicated he's going to make a motion. I want to just underscore that message loud and clear, though. That is the bare minimum I expect to see done this year. And I know that we can't direct LTC, but we can certainly ask. And I know Ms. Plesny is listening and has responded already to some things. This has to be a priority from my perspective. So I hope that that's heard and taken into consideration, because we need to do better for our paratransit riders, for those people who are dependent on those bookings to enjoy a quality of life in this city. So I just want to take that opportunity to underscore, for me, that's where we have to land first. That should be an easy to do. It shouldn't require a lot of investigation or testing. I know we have an app coming online later this year where people can book a ride in the industrial area from Argyle Mall. So if we can do that, we should be able to do the same for paratransit. So I really encourage LTC to make this an absolute priority to get done this year. And certainly I'll look forward to Councillor Trussow's motion, hear what he has to say, but I'm in general agreement with everything here. So thank you everybody for your time, for giving me an opportunity to speak at your committee, Madam Chair. And I'll be listening attentively to the discussion and back and forth from your committee members as we provide some direction on this.
Thank you. I'll look to committee as well as visiting members for any additional questions or comments. Okay, thank you. With the committee's indulgence, if they're okay with me asking questions from the chair, I did have a question that I wanted to ask of Ms. Madden and Ms. Lau. And again, thank you for the engagement and particularly for continuing to come to council repeatedly for what must seem like a decade to ask and advocate for change. You know, I'm absolutely humbled by the fact that you took the time to share with so many councilors the perspectives, the experience, and then to then seek out additional experiences from others to tell us that this is not just a one-off, this is a system problem, and it needs to be dealt with because it's 2023. I wanted to just follow up on some of the conversations that I've engaged with you on, specifically around the strategic plan. So I know that outside of today's presentations and the recommendations that are here, there is a desire to see more language in the strategic plan around this matter. And I know we're in a different committee, but I just was hoping that you might be able to entertain and share some thoughts on that as well. Thank you.
Yes, hi. Thank you for allowing us to be here. And I appreciate all the attention that this is finally getting, because it has been a long road. And, you know, I've been advocating for this for 8 years now. And I think, as I've told you, when I started, it was everybody knew at that time, every user, every agency, every counselor, and every LTC executive knew that we had a broken system. And COVID has obviously become an excuse for part of it, but COVID really just turned the system into a crisis as opposed to just being broken. So as I understood, as I sat on the Accessibility Advisory Committee for 5 years and worked and began to understand the system, what I learned was that if it wasn't in the strategic plan, that there wasn't going to be money for it. And I think that ultimately, the LTC is going to have to ask for money at some point in time to fix the problems that they have, which is why we've started right away with coming to you and asking you for it to be in the strategic plan. And so what we see in the strategic plan, I know as outcomes, is just a commitment to improving paratransit in the city. But the specifics we want to get down to are the things that Jeff has talked about. The specifics are the same day booking, the online booking. Capacity has to be increased, because there's no point, there's no point, but if we don't have increased capacity, if we don't have more rides, it almost doesn't matter how we book the system, we're still going to have a log jam. So we need increased capacity. Things like smart card readers have been on LTC buses since 2015 and are not on the paratransit buses yet. These are supposed to be parallel services. They should have happened at the same time. They haven't. We're now 8 years out of compliance for that one. We also, the live tracking, there's no reason not to do that. I think we need to find inefficiencies so that our system works better, and we need to train the drivers. So those are the things that ultimately I would like to see reflected in the actions in the strategic plan.
Thank you. I'll look to direct my second question to Ms. Pleshny, if possible. I'm wondering if, I know that you don't have the recommendations in front of you, and so I know there is a bit of a challenge there. I just wanted to find out from, again, understanding the role that we have as counselors at this committee, and knowing that a lot of this is already within your work plan, where counselors can provide perhaps, or what's the best way for counselors to provide more input into changes in this system? Is it, in your opinion, through our strategic plan? Is it through our members of LTC, commissioners that are sitting here today? Any thoughts you have on ways that can be communicated? And second to that is from the public, what do you need from the public in terms of feedback and in terms of their concerns shared with you in order for more changes to happen as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In terms of your first question, pardon me, Certainly, anything reflected in the strategic plan, in council strategic plan, is then looked at and incorporated into London Transit's business plan to ensure that we're meeting those strategic targets. So certainly inclusion of items such as what's been talked about today in the strategic plan would be helpful. Following that, obviously supporting any budget requests that would come forward in order to implement this type of thing. So as we're all aware, we're moving into a 4-year budget. So if there's, if there's specific things that council is looking for and asking the commission to incorporate into that 4-year budget submission, then obviously council support of that submission subsequent to that would be required in order for us to move forward. In terms of feedback from the public, we certainly hear from the public through our customer contact process. We also have a voice of the customer survey that we conduct with the actual riders of the service. Unfortunately, that was put on hold during the pandemic, given any number of resource issues, but that is scheduled to recommence in 2023. So that will be a direct outreach to both conventional and specialized customers, asking for their views and also asking for what their priorities are for service. So it's not just targeted to, what are your complaints? What are the things that you're happy with? But what are your priorities? Where would you like to see us move first? We also work hand in hand with our Accessible Public Transit Service Advisory Committee in terms of setting those priorities for each year and moving forward strategically. So we have the public piece somewhat in hand. Certainly any direct communications that councillors receive can be forwarded to us. We will undertake to respond to those and copy councillors accordingly.
Thank you. That's much appreciated, and I do know that my office has shared some communications as well, and that has been very helpful to receive that feedback from LTC. Just wondering, you mentioned the Accessibility Advisory Committee for LTC. I'm just wondering if you can share any information about the makeup of that committee and how the public interacts with that committee from your perspective.
I'm not sure. The new committee has just been appointed, and off the top of my head, I can't think of all of the members' names. We could certainly share the makeup of the committee back with members of council subsequent to this meeting. But again, they function as an advisory committee. They are, for the most part, registrants of the specialized service. We do have some members that aren't, but they're representative of groups that would utilize the specialized service. And they're open to receive delegations just like any other advisory committee. And they also undertake outreach for us and bring that back to advisory committee meetings to be shared with the commission.
Thank you. I have Councillor Pribble next for questions, comments.
Through the chair, just a comment to us and to the public. I want to thank Professor Preston for all the work, as well as Mrs. Madden, who took the time and met with most of the councillors one-on-one. And we are conducting our own competitive analysis with other municipalities in Ontario. And I know you are as well. We will certainly put it together combined, but there is no doubt that when I look at it already now that we are lagging behind, and there's a tremendous room for improvement, and we will certainly deliver better results for every user of paratransit. We will. We do have at our, as a councillor who is also on the board of LTC, we do have delegation of both of you on March 6th, which I'm looking forward to, and we will certainly make steps to deliver better results, no doubt. But thank you very much for your time and bringing it to our attention, and exactly what Councillor Curry said before. I was not aware so how would I say the best word, the improvements we have to do to really provide a service, acceptable and much improved service for everyone who needs paratransit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Ferreira.
Thank you, and through you, this is something that I've been trying to bring just to people's attention right from the beginning, and I did meet Jackie up there, and we did have a great chat. She did say something that I thought that we should just bring, just kind of underline that. Ultimately, this is probably going to have some associated costs. So I guess my first question would be to Kelly, if she could speak to the amount of subsidization for paratransit as it is right now, just so we can kind of get a gauge on what we're talking about here. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Fleshy.
Thank you. Through the chair, I believe right now, I believe in the 2023 budget, municipal council funds approximately 75% of the costs associated with specialized transit, with the differential, the other 25 being made up by fares and provincial gas tax.
Thank you. Follow-up, Councillor?
Yes, and through you. So that's, I wanted to point that out just because I know that the level of subsidization is quite high, but it is something that is a need. And, you know, I have been hearing people speak about just like the same day services and then kind of integration with the app. We do have an app right now that, from what I understand, does have that ability. So I feel like the path forward for something like that should be, I'm hoping, a little bit easier than creating an app from scratch. But I did also hear about just the fear of people who would be booking on the app would kind of disenfranchise individuals who are not using the phone or who wouldn't use the app, who only use the phone. So that would be something that I would also like just to point out that we'd have to also consider moving forward. So that's probably more of a comment, but I'll leave it there. And thank you.
Thank you. I'll go back to Councillor Trasso. Go ahead.
So I'd like to make a motion. This is in rough draft form, and through the chair, the clerk can fix this. It should start by acknowledging that the Civic Works Committee, on February 22nd, heard a delegation from Professor Jeff Preston, as well as Jacqueline Madden and Wendy Lau, L-A-U, with respect to paratransit services in the City of London. And the next paragraph can recite the documents that were received. The next paragraph should speak from council. And now I am referring to page 9 or 10 in the slide deck that talks about the recommendations. The committee recommends that LTC adopt the following. 1, by September 2023, A, same-day booking options, B, smart card access in every bus, and C, sensitivity training for drivers. 2, by January 2024, A, online app booking option, B, live bus tracking, C, increased efficiency so riders do not spend excessive amounts of time on the bus. And 3, 4-year goal, increase ride capacity by 10% annually. It being noted that suggestions are also forwarded to the SPPC for inclusion in the strategic plan. And I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. We are just in the process of putting this into eScribe, so please give us a moment. Just for clarification, Councillor, are you looking to forward the recommendations to LTC as we can't direct LTC through this committee?
The operative words I used were it's recommended. Now, in terms of forwarding it to LTC, and thank you for that question, this would come up at the council meeting of what day? Should this committee pass this recommendation, it would go to council on March
7th?
Which would be the day after the LTC meeting.
Yes.
So I think I need some help here. I think our two representatives on LTC have heard enough today that they would be able to, should this committee today pass this recommendation on to City Council, which the City Council would not adopt until after the LTC meeting, you would have heard enough to be able to go to the LTC and say, this is what came from a committee, and there's strong support on City Council for this. And I think you could say that informally. It would not come as a formal recommendation from City Council until after the City Council meeting has the opportunity to adopt today's recommendation.
Thank you.
If
I
that's
just
wrong.
need to seek clarification. So I'm going to go to Ms. Westlake Power.
Thank you. Through the chair, I have been working with Ms. Mason about some draft wording, which I think is pretty consistent with what Councillor Trosso has outlined there. I'm not sure whether or not it's being loaded into eScribe yet, but I believe that it is in the vein that is requested, and also that it is sensitive to council's ability to direct, and then it would allow for some feedback back to this committee. So I would point you in the direction of that which I understand is loaded into eScribe for consideration.
Okay, so councilors, that's loaded into eScribe for you. For the public, I'll just go through what is included here, and I will look for a seconder after that. That the following recommendations be forwarded to the London Transit Commission with an update back to the Civic Works Committee with respect to proposed implementation relating to paratransit. A, same-day booking options, smart card access in all buses, and sensitivity training for drivers. B, online booking options, live bus tracking, and increased efficiencies to reduce travel time for riders. And C, increased annual ride capacity by 10%. It being noted that the Civic Works Committee received the attached presentation from Dr. Jay Preston.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Councillor Tross, I'm just going to ask some questions of clarification just to make sure that we've captured everything through the recommendations. So I'm just wondering, do you want the timeline language included where it says by September 2023, by January 2024, and the 4-year goal?
I think that would strengthen the measure and point to the urgency that we see here. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. I do have a question from Councillor Ferreira. Just before we take that question, I would need a seconder in order to put this motion on the floor. Thank you, Councillor Cuddy. I will go to Councillor Ferreira and any additional councillors for questions or comments. Councillor Ferreira.
Thank you, and through you. So we are adding the time requirements onto this motion, just to confirm. The time, Councillor Trosso's time requirements, we're going to be adding to that. Is that? Okay, so I do like the time requirements. I do know that it's probably going to be up for negotiation just as staff comes back and sees what is actually practical and doable, but just having targets is a good thing. So that's, so I do like that. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Any additional questions, comments from members of the committee or visiting councillors? Okay, seeing none, just give us a moment to load that into eScribe and then we'll open it for a vote. Okay, councillors, that's open for you.
Closing the vote, the motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Once again, I want to take the opportunity to thank Professor Doctor, now I'm going to call you Professor Doctor, Preston and Ms. Madden, Ms. Lau for taking the time to come and speak to us on this matter. And just for the public, again, this matter will now go to council on March the 7th. And I know that you have a delegation as well coming up at LTC. I want to thank Ms. Poleshny for attending today as well and for answering questions of the committee and being so forthcoming and providing such great feedback as well. And thank you to our visiting counselors from our LTC Commission counselors for being here as well. Okay, and Deputy Mayor Lewis, yes, thank you. With that, I will look to move back to items that were on the consent agenda that we moved on from. So I will move to item 2.3, which is the electric kick scooter and cargo power assisted bicycle pilot project bylaw and bylaw amendments. Before we go to the added request for delegation status of a Petrie, sorry, I'll just turn to staff and see if there's any comments or any items that they'd like to discuss with respect to that report before we hear from the delegation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Probably the only item just to highlight is that the discussion we're about to have today actually started with the previous council and CWC at the time. And in our report today, we've actually provided the executive summaries from both of the previous reports that were dealing with e-scooters and cargo e-bike. There was a fair bit of community engagement, engagement with our advisory committees in the development of that earlier work and the ultimate decision of council to proceed or how to proceed with the two pilot projects that are from the provincial government. And I guess it's really important to note that the province, when they established these, they provided authority to the municipalities to establish local bylaws and to develop programs that made sense for their communities. On the understanding that our information is going to be shared up with the provincial government, we're in regular contact with them on both these files. And that further information will be coming by the province, and it was going to be, we believe, their responsibility to pull together the details and ultimately make decisions that we hope actually are at the provincial level and apply to all communities, so there's that type of consistency. So I think that was probably the main thing to share prior to our further discussion today.
Thank you. So for the committee, we have two delegation requests, one from A. Petrie and the other from M. Mixa, who I understand is in the gallery. So I would look for a motion to approve the two delegations. Okay, Councillor Cuddy and Councillor Trassa, thank you. That'll be open your system to vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Okay, thank you. So I'll go to A. Petrie first. Alex, I understand, is the first name. And Alex, you have 5 minutes to present. And for the committee and for those tuning in, the presenter is on Zoom. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I do believe there was a presentation shared with members of council earlier on. If councillors are able to follow along, that would be appreciated as I speak through. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Alexandra Petre, and I am the CEO of a Canadian shared e-scooter company with operations in several Ontario cities. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about our vehicles, but I do want to say that shared e-scooters are part of a commercial program which offers cities much more robust and technologically sophisticated e-scooters than those e-scooters available for purchase online or from stores. We have a table in our presentation that summarizes the advantages of a shared e-scooter program over personally owned e-scooters. Some highlights include speed governors to cap maximum speed, This is usually at 20 kilometers an hour. Noise emission technology, so those that are blind or hard of seeing can hear approaching e-scooters. Anti-sidewalk riding technology, and we would like to highlight that none of these technologies or features are available with personally owned e-scooters. Shared e-scooter programs also have geofencing technology to slow e-scooters down from the maximum speed to a slower speed in desired areas, or prevent riding and parking in certain key areas as desired by the city. This cannot be done with personally owned e-scooters. Shared e-scooter companies can apply this technology to key sidewalks, and that means that when anti-sidewalk detection technology is applied, we are able to safely slow the e-scooter down and prevent sidewalk riding. Personally owned e-scooters do not have this ability. Shared e-scooter companies deploy a host of parking technologies, including end-of-ride photos to check compliance, virtual parking spots in the app to direct riders where to park compliantly, geofencing to prevent parking to certain key areas, enforcement through fines and suspensions, just to name a few. Shared e-scooter programs offer a host of public education campaigns in person and in app. Personally owned e-scooters come with no education. Shared e-scooter programs have safe street patrols to educate and enforce local laws in real time and to respond to issues. Cities won't get this with legalizing personally owned e-scooters. Additionally, beginner mode is a technology we use to lower the max speed and offer softer acceleration on the first number of trips on an e-scooter, akin to training wheels on your bike. Cities can mandate this on the first number of trips, but it's always available to riders. This technology does not exist for personally owned e-scooters. Helmet selfie technology also helps encourage and promote helmet wearing by riders. This technology does not exist for personally owned e-scooters. This technology helps discourage drunk and disorderly riding and can be geofenced to certain nights of the week and areas of the city. If a rider can't pass a CAPTCHA style test, the e-scooter does not unlock. You do not get this with legalizing personally owned e-scooters. Last but not least, there is an app feature which allows anyone in the city to report an e-scooter that is misparked or otherwise impeding access into the public right-of-way. This reporting feature for riders and non-riders to report things directly to the relevant e-scooter company does not exist for personally owned e-scooters. And the e-scooter companies typically respond within 15 minutes to any of these requests. Lastly, given the advantages of a shared e-scooter program outlined in our presentation and the control the city gets with a shared e-scooter program that you do not get with legalizing personally owned e-scooters, we are hoping committee may entertain this motion. I recognize there has been some historical hesitancy in London on this topic, so this proposed motion proposes to start smaller and allow the city to wet their feet and, if successful, grow a shared e-scooter program in future years in a conservative and responsible manner. Lastly, should the city require, shared mobility companies can also provide bike share devices as well in addition to e-scooters. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look to the committee for any questions, excuse me, of staff or of the presenter related to the topic. Go ahead, Councillor Chassa.
Yes, thank you for coming. I appreciate your presentation. Before I ask my question, I just want to verify something with staff, if I may, through the chair. And that is, you indicated that it is sensible to ask for vendors to be providing both scooters and e-bike services and not separate them, because the scooters can tend to subsidize the larger cycles. Is that correct, that you want to see them not decoupled, that you want to see them together?
Thank you. Are you asking, sorry, the presenter, or are you asking staff?
I'm asking staff.
Okay, thank you. Through you to staff.
Through the chair, the experience that we saw here in London was that The information that came forward had e-scooters offering a subsidy that would lower the cost of a bike share program. At that point in time, that was not the direction that the bike share RFP, request for proposal, was heading. When we went out again, it was strictly for bike share alone, and that is the subject of a report today that we'll be talking about. Should we go out again in the future, it appears that the experience in other communities are looking at a combination of micromobility options where bikes and e-scooters could be potentially part of the same offering, or two companies working collaboratively. But that is something there that further research has to be done and is referred to in some of our work that is before you today.
Thank you. Councillor, I'm wondering if we should hear the other delegation first and then come back to additional questions, as it may help to answer some more smooth or can create more questions as well. Okay, with that, I know that Mixa is in the gallery, so I'll give you the opportunity to please go ahead. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Totally different slant on this, but my name is Molly Mixa. I'm the Executive Director of London Cycle Link. I would like to thank City staff for preparing and proposing these bylaws and bylaw amendments. I have one concern and proposal. Several times the following wording is used for both electric kick scooters and cargo power assist bicycles in these bylaws. Quote, the bike or scooter shall be operated as close to the right edge of the shoulder or edge of roadway as possible. So I just want to say this is dangerous language, as close to the right edge as possible. We have an education program where we work with 10 and 11-year-olds, teaching them to ride bikes safely, and we teach them to ride 1 meter out from the curb. This allows them to react if they come across obstacles, so debris, potholes, etc., in their path. If someone is riding as close to the right edge of the shoulder as possible, there is no room to move. One must either ride over the pothole or obstacle or veer to the left, where there may be a car or truck not expecting them. So I would propose to edit this language in all occurrences, which there are several, to, for example, the bike or e-scooter shall be operated as close to the right edge of the shoulder as is practical, as is safe, as is comfortable, or optionally shall be operated at a distance of 1 meter from the right shoulder or edge of the roadway. It is my understanding that this verbiage comes from the Provincial Highway Traffic Act. I'm not sure if that must flow down to London municipal language. If not, I would really advise this edit for the protection of all road users. And just further to reference on that, the province's own website, which advises cyclists as follows: to stay to the right, ride in a straight line on the right-hand side of the road at least 1 meter from the curb or from parked cars where practical. When being passed, stay as close to the right side of the road as you can. You are allowed to use any part of the lane for safety reasons, such as avoiding obstacles in your lane. You do not need to stay to the right when preparing to turn left, passing another vehicle, you are going faster than other vehicles, the lane is too narrow to share. So that's from the provincial website. So just again, I would urge the committee to consider an edit to the language in the interests of road safety for all users. Thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate the providing that feedback on the language as well. I will look to committee to see if there are additional questions related to this item. Councillor Cuddy.
Thank you, and to you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Petrie, for the presentation, and thank you to the Speaker for presenting that. And I wonder if the Speaker wouldn't mind, Madam Chair, sending the members of Civic Works the information on that, so I could take that into consideration. Thank you. And I'm not sure if this is a question, Madam Chair, for Ms. Petrie or for staff, but if we were to proceed with a pilot project for this, is there a cost that the city is required to pay for the initial pilot presentation? Thank you.
Thank you. To staff.
Madam Chair, if we were to decide to join the provincial pilot project, we'd require direction from committee and council to do so, at which point we would go out to the market through our standard procurement processes. I would advise committee to be cautious about engaging in what could be considered an unsolicited proposal, because it could be problematic not only for you, but also for the vendor, who could then be excluded. So I would answer that question from a staff perspective, that we don't know the cost until we go out and ask what could come to the table should we pursue joining the e-scooter pilot project. So first would be to get direction from committee to change the previous decision of council not to participate in that commercial e-scooter pilot project.
Follow up?
Go ahead, Councillor Cuddy.
Thank you. May I direct Ms. Scheer directly? So we don't know if there's a cost because we don't know if the provider is going to require a cost, but I see Ms. Petrie shaking her head. So I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Am I able to speak? So sorry, I'm not sure of the rules.
Just a moment. I'm going to go to staff, and I also have Ms. Westlake Power with her hand up as well.
I can defer to the clerk, as she may be able to provide some additional information as to how to direct the conversation, and then would prefer to speak second.
Thank you. I'll go to Ms. Westlake Power, please.
Thank you. Through the chair, I would I raised my hand to acknowledge what Ms. Scheer has pointed out. There has not been council direction in this regard, and it has been considered previously. So starting in a new direction at this point with a vendor is inherently problematic, and I would caution the committee about that. What's before you today is outlined in the staff report, in the original agenda on page 13, page 5 of the staff report, which outlines the council direction that this report is specifically related to. And I would encourage the committee to keep the focus specific to the report before you and not to what may have been presented by the delegation. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Ms. Westlake Power. So, Ms. Petrie, I don't think it would be appropriate at this time for you to respond to that question. And I'll go back to staff to see if Ms. Scheer has anything else to add.
Thank you for that, Ms. Westlake Power and Madam Chair. Our advice would be, as the Deputy Clerk has indicated, to consider the bylaw that is in front of you that refers to personal use for e-kick scooters as well as cargo power. Powered cargo bikes, pardon me. Should the committee wish for us to pursue the provincial commercial scooter share pilot project, then we would go through the regular process of reconsideration, which would then follow, after direction from council, an RFP being put out for some combination of that provision of service to the vendors who are available in the Canadian or, well, it could be almost anywhere marketplace, depending on who's interested in bidding, but we would not want to presuppose the outcome of that process.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Cuddy?
Madam Chair, thank you, and thank you, Ms. Scheer. I'll defer to any other members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Trosso.
I have no further questions for Ms. Petrie. But I did want to raise, with respect to e-scooters specifically, what does the pilot project empower the City of London to do that we don't already have the power to do?
Thank you. Through to staff.
Through you, Madam Chair. The pilot project for the e-scooter is a requirement of following through to enact what the provincial government wishes municipalities to do. They have given us the authority to implement bylaws at the local level on how e-scooters would function. They've asked us to do that for a period of time. I believe it is till the end of 2024 for the e-scooter pilot project. At that time, the provincial government will assess the information obtained from the different municipalities that have agreed to participate, and then hopefully make decisions that are for the province or filter back in another form to the municipality.
But people in London are already lawfully using e-scooters, right?
Through to staff.
Through the chair, this permits them to operate legally in the City of London, the bylaws.
I guess without wanting to get into a jurisdictional dispute that might require legal assistance, does the city currently have the ability to allow these e-scooters on the street without further provincial authorization pursuant to the broad authorities that cities have regulating our streets and roads?
Through you to staff? Or to staff, sorry.
Through the chair, it has been a gray area and one that has been difficult for municipalities and here in the City of London. These can be legally purchased in retail, legally purchased online, but without any bylaws, we do not have any regulatory authority over them right now. So they would be deemed illegal in London right now, but there is probably proper wording that we would have from our legal folks on how one would actually term that, but that is my best understanding of the matter right now.
Thank you. Councillor Chaucer, follow up?
Yes, that's very helpful. I think if I may turn my attention then to the bikes.
We're not on that item right now, so I'd like to close out this item first and then go from there. I'll just check in with Councillor Van Meerbergen and see if he had any questions.
No, I'm fine right now, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and I'll go back to Councillor Cuddy. Go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, and I'll be brief, to staff. So it's my understanding that some cities can operate with the e-scooters currently because their bylaws allow them to, but London is prohibited because of the bylaw problem. Do I have that right, Ms. Chair?
Thank you. Through to staff.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My understanding, not being a lawyer, but my understanding of this is that in order to authorize either scooter share, e-scooter share, or personal use of e-scooters, cities have had to choose to opt into one or both of the provincial pilots. On previous direction from Council, we are opting in only to creating bylaws governing personal e-scooter use in London right now, and we're deferring a future decision on an e-scooter share program to the Mobility Master Plan, which will be completed towards the end of this year, early next year, where we have a discussion more broadly around micromobility and commercial micromobility.
Thank you very much, and Madam Chair, thank you. I was going to propose a motion, but I think at this stage it probably wouldn't be prudent. Thank you.
Thank you. If the committee is okay for me to speak from the chair, I do have a couple questions. So specific to Ms. Mixa's, if you don't mind if I ask you a question, your point regarding the wording that's included in this particular recommendation and the updated proposed bylaw language. Just wondering if you could repeat again the language, and then I'm going to go to staff for comment.
Sure. Yeah, and sorry for not having a written submission. It was just timely. Options that I would suggest considering, the vehicle shall be operated as close to the right edge of the shoulder, and then in place of what it has now, as is practicable, as is safe, or optionally, shall be operated at a distance of 1 meter from the right shoulder or edge of the roadway. Staff might have better options too, but I just think something to replace what's currently there.
Thank you. I'll turn to staff. I'm wondering if you can provide any comment on a language change and if there's any concern with that or reason for the particular language that's included in the bylaw.
Madam Chair, through you, this is Lynn Marshall speaking, one of the solicitors for the city.
Thank you.
If I could respond to that. These are vehicles that are governed by the Highway Traffic Act, and so normally with respect to the Highway Traffic Act, they would not be allowed on highways, so they're governed provincially. This is a provincial pilot project. So if a municipality passes a bylaw to authorize them on property that's governed by municipalities, so our own streets and highways and parks, etc., then if we do pass a bylaw authorizing them, then they would be allowed under the Highway Traffic Act as well. So that's kind of how those fit together. In terms of the change to the wording with respect to how far away they have to be from the edge of the roadway, that wording is contained in the provincial regulation. And so I would not be recommending that that wording be changed, because our bylaws cannot be more permissive than what is set out in the requirements of the provincial regulation.
Thank you for clarifying that, much appreciated. I'll look to other members of the committee before we put on the floor the recommendation. Councillor Trosso? Okay, thank you. So as you can see, there was a recommendation included in the report as well. Just looking for a mover and a seconder for that recommendation. Sorry, I have it open in eScribes. It's page 9. Okay, so I'm looking for a mover for the recommendation that on the recommendation of the Deputy City Manager, Environment and Infrastructure, the following actions related to the electric kick scooter and cargo power assisted bicycle pilot projects be taken, A, B, C, D, and E. Sorry, Councillor Trosso, did you have a comment?
Yes.
Can you use your microphone, please?
Now, this bylaw is now including cycles, and I did have a number of questions about the cycles. So I'm not prepared to proceed to this yet. I wanted to ask some questions about the e-cargo cycles. And I was told I wasn't.
Okay, sorry, I thought you were talking about bike share. So yes, go ahead with your questions about e-cargo. Go ahead.
Okay, we have attached to our packet provincial regulations in respect to many items concerning scooters and e-bikes. And I understand that the city at this time would be hesitant to amend what's in those provincial regulations. And that is what I understand the council just said. And I appreciate that, and I'm going to respect that. But as long as council is here, if she is still here, I don't know. Is there anything in the provincial regulations that deal with the limitation of operating the cycles on streets and roads that where it is greater than 50 miles, 50 kilometers per hour? Because I went through all of the provincial regulations that were attached. And while I did see the specifications about how to drive it and what has to be physically in the product, I didn't see the 50 mile, I didn't see the 50 kilometer provision in there. Could you help me with that? Did I miss that, or is it just not there?
To staff?
To staff, to the solicitor, if she's still here.
Through you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Marshall.
Councillor Trosso is correct. There is nothing in the provincial pilot regulation that speaks to the 50 kilometer per hour cutoff, but that is more restrictive and not more permissive than what would be found in that provincial legislation.
Thank you for that. So through the chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
And I did share a rough of this with the clerk, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to understand why that 50 kilometer limitation is in there because I'd like to take it out. And the reason I want to take it out is many of the streets in London have 60-kilometer or more limits. And if we limit the, and I'm thinking about specifically the e-cargo bikes here right now that would be used for commercial deliveries, I think we would be precluding from the start, by definition, the ability of a lot of the businesses that we would like to actually have do this from even coming out of their driveway if they're on a 60-kilometer street.
Okay, thank you. Over to staff for comment.
Through you, Madam Chair. When we pulled together the bylaw, many different individuals at the city were involved, our parks folks, our bylaw folks, legal, and many people from our particular service area. We looked at a variety of things. When it came to the Eagle car bikes and we looked at the road network, our thought was, where would this likely apply the most? And when we looked at sort of the central business area, downtown London, Old East Village, in those areas, we are clearly at 50 kilometers or less for the most part. And then when we looked further out, Oxford, by way of an example, from Cherry Hill Mall right over to Highbury, it is 50 or less. When we looked at other streets between Windermere and Commissioners, we were 50 or less. So we felt at that point, 50 was an appropriate starting point to come forward as part of the bylaw. We felt it was also a bit cautious, and yes, would rule out part of London. At the same time, it is a pilot project, and these are things that we learn. And if stakeholders come forward and say, look, I would like to participate, but this is the barrier for me, that would not prevent us from coming forward with that kind of information and further analysis to make a subsequent change, all within the pilot project period, which in this case goes till March 1st, 2026, according to the provincial government. So there is a future opportunity to make a change, should that be the wish of Civic Works, or if it wishes to change today. You've now heard our rationale.
So I would like to make the change today. And the reason why I would like to make the change today is if we want commercial operations to do this, we have to make it as easy as possible. And I already understand how long it takes to go through a cycle of coming to a committee, getting a recommendation, getting a staff report, and reenacting it. And I really want as many vendors, delivery companies to be doing this as possible because it will be reducing emissions. I do not see any substantial safety issue by eliminating that 50 kilometer. Now, if you want to raise it to 60, I'm okay with that, but leaving it at 50, I think is too restrictive, and I would like to remove that. And I would so move. And again, I'm thinking down the line. I don't have the overlay of where it's 60 kilometers in the city, but I just know from my own personal experience, I do see 60 quite a bit. Can you give me some examples of streets where abutting residential areas where it's 60? Because I don't have the overlay.
Thank you, Ms. Shear.
Yeah, through the chair.
Mr. McRae.
Through the chair, as Mr. Stanford sort of vaguely described, the sort of the central area of the city is largely 50 or less through the area speed limit program. All residential areas are either 40 kilometers per hour or to become 40, and they would currently be 50 if they're not phased in yet, and that'll be done by the beginning of next year. So 60 kilometer per hour speed limits or higher really only pertain to the major road network. So examples, sort of, the limits is, examples are Oxford Street east of Highbury Avenue. Highbury Avenue is also posted at 60 for much of its length through sort of its residential and commercial areas. Commissioners Road is another example of much of it is 60 kilometers through its residential and business areas. Wonderland Road is another example. So there are some of the higher order major roads that are 60, but the sort of anticipation for a cargo power assisted bicycle use and the businesses that might incorporate that were anticipated to be in these areas that are probably dominated by 50 or less.
Thank you. Councillor Trosso, go ahead.
Yeah,
Through the chair.
is any Richmond Street or Adelaide Street 60?
Mr. McCray?
I believe Richmond Street is 50 up until somewhere in the area of north of Windermere Road, and then I think it might transition. I'd have to check the records on that.
Adelaide?
Much of Adelaide is 50 through the sort of the central area, and then it goes to higher limits outside of the sort of the central area.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I just want to follow this up. I would be very happy if we lowered all the 60s to 50. And if what you're representing to me is, I'm really worrying about the excluding the 60s. Am I okay?
Councillor Trussell, let's stay on target here with this conversation. So you want to look at whether or not it should only apply to those 50 kilometers less, or if it should apply to.
I want to raise, so long as we have 60s that are abutting residential neighborhoods, which I understand we have, where it would be very likely that somebody would want to make a delivery. I do not want one of these cargo bikes to have to figure out how to get to their destination without traversing, even for a block, in violation of our law, the 60. So I mean the 50. So I would like to raise it to 60. And yes, you're quite right. That's a whole nother question for a whole nother day, and I'll save that. But I would like to make an amendment that we change 50 to 60.
Okay, so thank you. At this time, we do not have this on the floor yet to
Okay.
amend. So I just need a seconder, and thank you. I'll go to Councillor Cuddy before going to Ms. Scheer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, I'll make this quick. I won't be supporting Councillor Trosso's motion. Thank you. Amendment to the motion.
Thank you. Okay, so this item isn't on the floor yet, so we're still having a conversation. Ms. Scheer, you wanted to provide some additional comment?
No, Madam Chair, I think you've got this in hand.
Thank you. If the committee permits, I do have a question as well. So just in relationship to the 60-kilometer-hour roadways, so I'll just refer to Ward 7 here. So we're talking, in Fanshawe Park and Hyde Park are both 60-kilometer roadways for parts of it, I will say. So just wondering how that might look for commercial e-cargo in the northwest corner where, we have more limitations as to getting around. I'm just trying to think what you envision from a staff perspective with that around there. Thanks.
Madam Chair, it would be an impediment, no doubt about it, because we would be strongly encouraging everyone, of course, to follow the rules as specified in the bylaw. When it comes to the cargo e-bike program, we believe there will be a fair bit of contact directly with city staff because it is new. And we'll be learning not only here in London, but also from other municipalities. As I indicated there, that with the concurrence of others, the ability to make a change and bring that forward to you is what one does under a pilot project. So from staff's perspective, we would be comfortable with coming forward when we have more information. The last thing we want to do is to prevent someone from moving forward. Until today, we have not heard that as an issue. But it is something there that we would keep our eyes on depending on the direction from today in council.
Thank you. So just to follow up, so what I'm hearing is that at this time, staff's recommendation remains that it's 50 kilometers or less, and that that consideration could be looked at following the pilot or later on throughout the pilot in order to help if it presents a problem in the future.
Madam Chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. I'll go back to Councillor Trosso.
If one is using a cargo bike that is less than the weight threshold that takes you into the pilot, that is the many commercial bikes that are already available for purchase and already lawfully operated on the streets, I think it's 45 kilograms is the cutoff point. Yeah, and I'm not quibbling with the 45 kilogram cutoff point because that is in the provincial regulations. Am I allowed to use my less than 45 kilogram cargo bike in an area that is posted at 60 kilometers per hour now?
Thank you, Mr. Stanford.
Through the chair, that is correct. There is no restriction.
Okay, so basically what you're saying through the chair is if I'm using a smaller weight bicycle, I can go into faster roads than if I'm using the higher commercial grade cycle. And I don't think that makes any sense. It makes no sense at all because we already have a number of people using the cargo bikes. We already have people using the cargo bikes very productively from what's posted on the internet. From what's posted on social media, and what I understand from our vendors, and what I understand from my conversations with all the cycling advocates in this town. And there's no reason why you couldn't go onto a 60-kilometer road. But if you cross that 45 kilogram threshold and you're now into a more robust, heavier duty cycle, you can't use it? Am I missing something, or is that the rule here that you're proposing?
Thank you to staff.
Through the chair, yes, for the purpose of this pilot project bylaw, we were going to have that restriction in place. We looked at the angles that have been discussed here from the different perspectives, and we felt that that was the appropriate point at this point to get started in the pilot program.
In which case, I would just very respectfully through the chair indicate I think that's an absurd result. And I don't know,
okay.
unless, wait a minute, unless we're going to put weights, scales
Counselor,
out on the
just
streets,
again,
how are they going to enforce it?
Again, just
No,
through the chair, and
through the chair,
let's use
how
respectful
do you
language,
plan on enforcing this? Because these cycles that are over 45 and less than 45 are going to be difficult to tell apart. How are you going to enforce this?
Madam Chair, respectfully, I know I'm not a member of your committee, but as a point of personal privilege, to call a staff's outcome ridiculous is not acceptable, and I'd ask the councillor withdraw that comment.
Yes, I will withdraw that comment, but I do think that it's not consistent. And I think it's not only not consistent, but it does raise some serious enforcement questions in terms of ascertaining the weight of a vehicle at any particular time. And thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Lewis. Okay, I will go to staff for comment on enforcement. Thank you.
Madam Chair, enforcing active modes is a challenge, generally speaking. They are being used on streets as part of under the Highway Traffic Act, and certainly we know that there are limitations available to police resourcing and resources. The reason that we did consider an alternative in terms of the area and speed limit concerns were related to the heavier category of vehicle that was included in this pilot. Should it be the will of committee to move that limit to 60 versus 50, staff will happily make those revisions in advance of City Council. We would seek that specific direction from committee, however.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, I will take you back to the recommendation that is in the package. As of right now, the recommendation has not been seconded and there is no amendment to the recommendation at this time. So I'm looking for a seconder for the recommendation at this point, and then we'll entertain an amendment if put forward. Councillor Van Meerbergen, are you seconding or are you putting your
I'm
hand up?
seconding the main motion.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion in front of us, moved and seconded, and I'm now looking if Councillor Trosa still is looking for his amendment.
Yes, I would. I'd like to amend 60 to 50. I'm sorry, I'd like to amend 50 to 60.
Okay, so you're looking to amend part. Can you just confirm that you're looking to amend the bylaw in Schedule A?
Yes, it appears, this language appears at various different places. It's in more than one place. It's in all of the conforming bylaws. So that line would have to be fixed in every bylaw, which I think could be done relatively simply.
Thank you. Okay, so before we go through that process, I'll look to committee for a seconder. Okay, I don't see a seconder. I would like to speak to the matter of the amendment before we move back to the main motion. And I just, Councillor Trosso, I hear what you're saying. I do, though, believe that staff has given us a path forward. They've said at this time, here's an opportunity to move forward with this at 50 kilometers an hour or less, and then review this in the future should an issue or concern come up, or should we hear feedback in the future. So with that, I will look to the clerk to open the main motion for voting.
Before you do that,
okay.
I want to look at the main.
Councillor Trosso, can you use your mic, please, and go ahead?
Yeah, I want to look carefully at the main motion because I might want to separate out part of it. So this is on page. Because we have two different items here. Is this page, what page is this in our packet? Is this?
It's item 2.3 in eScribe.
Yeah, okay.
Or page 5 of your report.
Page 5 of the report.
Sorry, 9.
Page 5 of the report is something different.
Sorry, that was my fault. Page 9.
Okay. I don't see any way to sever my objection from this, so I'll just leave it and vote no on the matter.
Okay, thank you. So councillors, that will be open for you to vote on.
Closing the vote, the motion passes 3-1.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 2.4, the results of the 2022 bike share request for proposal, process, and next steps. I just wanted to give staff an opportunity to provide any comment on this report as well. And councillors, you'll note that there is our committee members, you'll note that there is an added included in your package as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to highlight a couple items that are in the report. From a staff perspective, we were surprised that there were not any compliant bidders. We knew that it might be a bit of a challenge, given that there were some restrictions in our request for proposal to do with how the program would be financed. But we had hoped, based on experience in other communities, that perhaps the pre-pandemic situation would exist where these programs were able to pay for themselves and turn a profit for the operators. What we discovered through this process, that was not the case. We did not have any compliant bids that were able to meet our terms and conditions. As we looked at that information and did some further research prior to presenting our report, it did become clearer that many programs, whether they're bike share or even e-scooter, that functioned before the pandemic, there have been changes in the marketplace that have resulted in the need for more collaborations, partnerships, and quite often municipal investment, either direct or indirectly, and more the case now, a direct financial operating investment, particularly for bike share. Our report covers off the experience in our last request for proposal, and as Ms. Scheer had referred to earlier, we're looking this as in part a learning experience. There's very limited investment to date by city staff on this, but the learnings have been very strong, and the learnings will be applied now to our mobility master plan and subsequent multi-year budget process. That'll come before committee and council as well to determine what the future of micromobility, and in that case, the combination of bike share, the combination or combining with or not combining with, depending on the solution, with e-scooters and other types of micromobility options that might be part of a future mobility system for the City of London.
Thank you. So there's a recommendation included in the report. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, and then we can have some conversation on it. Moved by Councillor Cuddy, seconded by Councillor Trosso. Any questions or comments?
I had a question.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Trosso.
Civic administration be directed to develop a micro mobility services business case, including bike share services. The way I read this is this leaves open the question of whether or not this would be done by a private vendor, or whether it would be done by a nonprofit, or whether it will be done by the city, or some combination of the three. Is that correct?
Thank you to staff.
Madam Chair, that is correct. This does provide us an option to look at a variety of delivery models, as well as the role the city may have in the financing of delivery of this service.
And it also recognizes, as I read the entire staff report, that one of the reasons why you think the request for proposals failed was because there was not an ongoing operating subsidy. Is that true?
Follow-up, go ahead, through to staff.
Madam Chair, it is always difficult to speculate on exactly why a vendor chooses to bid or not bid, but we believe that that likely did play a role.
Okay, then I want to thank you for, yes, I just want to, through the chair, I just want to thank you for drafting this in a way that allows that flexibility. And I don't think I need to go into any detail right now in terms of what my preference would be in those modes, because it's not before us. But I do think that this is drafted in such a way that allows that future flexibility, which is why I'm going to support the recommendation in this report.
Thank you. Any additional comments, questions from committee members? Seeing none, I'll look to call the vote on this item.
Closing the vote, the motion passes 4-0.
Okay, moving along, we're on item number 4. There are no items for direction, so we'll go to item number 5. 5.1 is the added third report of the Integrated Transportation Community Advisory Committee, included in your package. Any questions or concerns from committee members? Comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to item 6, which is adjournment. Oh, sorry, 1 second. We have to vote on that the report be received on item 5.1? Sorry. Just looking for a mover and a seconder. Seconder? Councillor Van Meerbergen, thank you. And we'll open that to vote.
Closing the vote, the motion passes 4-0.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was rushing to adjournment. We'll move to looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Cuddy, seconded by Councillor Trosso, and all in favor. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.